friends, welcome back. Let us continue with our discussion about positive organizational scholarship. In the previous class, we discussed about workplace spirituality and work engagement. Those were the two aspects of organizations which have positive connotations, right? And we ended up with work engagement. But what engagement leads to? Even engagement is there, cognitive, physical, mental, psychological involvement is there, but finally where it leads to. It is not only about reaching the organizational objectives or performing the task to the best, there is something else that it leads to, and it actually leads to a state of flow. This is the most positive psychological impact of work engagement. So, it is a positive mental state of being completely absorbed, focused and involved in one's own activities, as well as deriving enjoyment from being engaged in that activity. There is complete immersion, complete involvement, even though he is at workplace, but he is in another world, or he is in a state of trance. Trance, I am using a word because that keeps you away from the whole materialistic world, and we are in that world from where you are deriving pleasure out of your work. So, this is a state of flow which is very difficult to achieve, but yes, there are employees who are so much into their job that it gives them not only engagement, it gives them lot of pleasure that they derive from their work, right. So, perhaps the state of flow colloquially terms being in the zone. So, they are in their own zone, they are in their own world where no one can enter, it is only themselves that they are there, and ultimately they are using all their energies, psychological energies at the same time to focus on their work and ultimately come out with better results. So, this is the best described by one of the participants interviewed in the earlier stages of flow research given by Csikszentmihalyi. He was the propounder of this term. He coined this term flow and has defined it as a holistic sensation that people feel when they act with total involvement. As I mentioned that they derive pleasure, they derive satisfaction. Satisfaction is just a term we are using, but there are exceptional employees who tend to derive pleasure in the true sense, and there is kind of sensation, there is a kind of glow that they derive from their work on their face or in their persona. They create an aura for themselves while being into the job. So, this is a state of flow which is a result of work engagement. So, Martin Seligman viewed flow as the psychological state of intense absorbed engagement in an activity where one's skills are fully matched with the challenge, leading to deep focus and a sense of joy or rapture. Rapture means intense joy, intense excitement that you enjoy when you are working. You do not need anything except that work, your skills, and you are aligning yourself with the work. So, it is about yourself, the true self you derive from that work, and you are aligning yourself with that work. So, it is a complete immersion, complete alignment, complete involvement and a complete focus which leads to sense of joy, that is state of flow, right. So, what are the characteristics of flow? How we can say that any individual employee is experiencing a state of flow? There is intense concentration, the concentration never fades away, maybe the self consciousness fades, maybe conscious state is not there, the person is unconscious in his work, he is not realizing that what the other environment is demanding from him or her, it is only him that he is into that work. So, there is a state of deep focus where time seems to stop and self consciousness fades. Skill challenge balance, when there is a state of flow, the task is challenging enough to require effort, but it is not perceived as difficult or overwhelming because there is a perfect match between an individual knowledge, skills and abilities, the individual self and the work. So, there is trio that keeps them engaged and into a state of flow, and there is intrinsic reward, that is it is enjoyable and rewarding for oneself independent of external outcomes. The person is not concerned with the external outcomes or any material possession. Any employee who is experiencing a state of flow will never expect any bonus or increment in the salary. It is about his understanding that I am experiencing excitement, joy, thrill and in performing a job, and that is his intrinsic reward, because motivation is there, interest is there, and more important, engagement and involvement is there. It is not that motivation is there only for materialistic success, motivation is there for sense of satisfaction. So, these are the characteristics of state of flow: intense concentration, skill challenge balance and intrinsic reward. And how to find flow at work? Everyone is engaged, everybody has some duties and role to play at workplaces, but sometimes we just fix it or limit it to our task, that we are busy with our task, we are engaged with our job in a way that we are just fulfilling it, and we are just coming back homes while maintaining balance. But there are people who want to experience a state of flow, who want to have some enjoyment in their work. So, how to find that flow at work? So, there are certain aspects to identify within oneself, so in order to be more into experiencing the state of flow. The first is identify your strengths. So, using the signature strengths, that is character strengths and virtues. Your transcendence, the level or state of transcendence, wisdom, humanity, courage, temperance and justice. They test to discover your highest personal strength. Any individual who scores high on his wisdom, who scores high on sense of justice, who scores high on courage, who scores high on temperance, who scores high on transcendence, that is out of the world, temperance, to maintain balance and not working beyond the limits. So, these are the strengths that an individual has. If any individual can identify his signature strengths, that this is what I am courageous, I am more to fight for justice, I am more to for wisdom, to have an understanding of morality, right, wrong or ethicality. If those strengths are identified within an individual, because every individual has some other kind of strength within himself, if those strength is identified, then that strength can be used to experience a state of flow. Because that strength, when is used, it can be used to recraft the work in a way that even autonomy is there, but still identifying your strength and combining with the autonomy, that will unleash an individual's energy, that aura in that work, that it transforms into something else. So, it is about identifying and matching your strengths to recraft your work, to use your higher strengths more often. Seek challenges. Once strengths have been identified, the challenges look menial. So, look for tasks that provide a good balance between skill and challenge, and set clear goals and get feedback. So, ensuring tasks have clear attainable goals and provide immediate feedback on process. So, all this feedback mechanism is an organizational activity, but before that, when a flow is being experienced by an individual, it is an automatic state of feedback that a person reaches, and the feedback becomes positive and enhanced. Thus, experiencing of deep enjoyment with an emphasis on the intrinsic reward of the activity itself. So, materialistic assessment in terms of feedback is the later outcome. Before that comes your inner feedback to yourself, that what you and how you rate your work in comparison to what you are experiencing. The more happiness, satisfaction you derive, the more opportunity you derive to use your strengths and sets of skills and challenges to perform the task. That is there to experience the state of flow. The another is creating a learning organization. This is a positive connotation and a more burgeoning research area in organizational behavior in terms of positive organizational scholarship. So, another way an organization can proactively manage change is to make continuous growth part of its culture and become a learning organization. A learning organization means more resources, more updating of the knowledge, more sharing of the knowledge is there, and ultimately the organizations become learning organizations. So, just as individuals learn, so too do organizations. So, learning organizations develop the continuous capacity to adapt and change, bring more flexibility and acceptance. All organizations learn whether they consciously choose to or not to. It is a fundamental requirement for their sustained existence. This has evolved in order to compete at the global market and capture the market to the maximum, right. So, most organizations engage in single loop learning, that is, they identify the errors, they detect the errors and keep on revisiting the past in order to correct that error, right. But when it comes to learning organizations, they use double loop learning, they correct errors by modifying the objectives, policies and standard routines. So, not focusing on the current problem, in learning organizations employ focus on that how the objectives can be modified, how the policies can be modified and standard routines can be modified in order to correct the errors. That means working at root level. So, double loop learning challenges deeply rooted assumptions and norms. It provides opportunities for radically different solutions to problems and dramatic jumps in improvement, because when organizations are learning to learn from the root level, then root level analysis and problem solving also takes place, and the learning organizations are being transformed into a better organization. So, how to identify that any organization is a learning organization? So, there exists a shared vision that everyone agrees on it. People discard the old ways of thinking and adapt to new ways of thinking. That is about double loop learning. They tend to indulge in root level analysis and come up with new thought process, how to resolve the problem. Members think of all the organizational process, activities, functions and interactions with the environment as part of the system of interrelationship. Why? Because it leads to a systemic environment, because every department is interdependent. Any department cannot be left in isolation. So, this kind of process is being introduced whenever the organizations are aiming to transform themselves into learning organization. People openly communicate with each other across vertical and horizontal boundaries without fear of criticism or punishment. That is, there is more open communication that brings lot of flexibility, and people sublimate their personal self-interest and fragmented departmental interest to work together to achieve the organization's shared vision. So, personal interests are set aside, conflicts are set aside, and ultimately the whole organization becomes a unified unit in order to transform into learning organizations, and respecting the barriers, overcoming those barriers, identifying those barriers and ultimately coming to a new picture. So, these are the characteristics of a learning organization. So, how to manage a learning organizations? There are some suggestions by OB professionals who have identified ways to transform organizations into learning organization. Establish a strategy, that is, management needs to make explicit commitment to change, innovation and continuous improvement. There is more exchange of knowledge at the same time. There is more professional development opportunities among employees and for employees in order to establish a novel strategy and compete the market. Redesign the organizational structures, that is, aligning with the departments in a way that systemic culture is there. So, flattening the structure, eliminating or combining departments and increasing the use of cross-functional team reinforces interdependence and reduces boundaries. Reshape the organization's culture, that is, to become a learning organization, managers must demonstrate by their actions that taking risk and admitting failures are desirable. That means rewarding people who take chances and make mistakes. Learning to manage needs to encourage functional conflict. It is about the policies and procedures, that how shared values, updated policies and procedures can be used in order to transform organizations to learning organizations, and at the same time they are more capable to identify risk, capable of taking the risk and ultimately overcoming failures. Thus, the key to unlocking real openness at work, says one expert on learning organization, is to teach people to bring paradoxes, conflicts and dilemmas out in the open. That means it is about double loop learning, where all the standards are revisited, all the conflicts, confusions, chaos, paradoxes are revisited openly with the organization. So, collectively we can be more intelligent than we can be individually. That means bringing up issues in the open, having an open discussion where knowledge sharing is also there, updating of the knowledge is also there, more generation of resources is also there, which an employee fails to do it at individual level, but when it is done collectively in a collective manner, then more solutions are being proposed, which makes the organization more updated and are transformed into learning organizations. But yes, when we are talking about learning organizations, it is about systemic organizations, it is about strategic organizations which requires lot of input based on learning, based on expertise that is derived by the employees, and also at the same time they are being accrued by the employees. So, that is how learning organizations are created and managed by the employees themselves. So, that is all for this unit. Thank you so much.